Hi friends, welcome or welcome back. Today I would like to talk about setting a Goodreads goal and how making it high might not be all it's cracked out to be. I have been reading since elementary school. I remember doing unspoken competitions with other kids in the class, and it never really stopped. We moved a few times, and feeling so new in a different place, I dove into reading more and more through high school, after high school, through college, and I started tracking my Goodreads goal in 2019. And I thought it would be a really fun way for me to not only increase what I was reading, but also keep track of what I was reading because I was enjoying so many books. I don't want to forget them all. I set my goal halfway through the year, and I ended up finishing 2019 reading 53 books, which is insane for 6 months. But I had the time. In 2020, I really dove in head first. I set my reading goal at 85 books for the year. I think I hit 111 books. And on top of reading and starting to listen to audiobooks, I also jumped into tracking through reading journals. So I was tracking page numbers, I was tracking time read, quotes that I enjoyed, I was tracking whatever I could possibly track. And I had a lot of fun doing it, but it put a lot of pressure on me internally. Also, in 2019, 2020 time era, I started listening to audiobooks. But the point is, these first year and a half of really diving headfirst into reading, I very, very quickly began to push myself to track what I was doing, to lean into my type A personality. And even though I enjoyed leaning into it and seeing myself meet those goals because I am so goal oriented, something like that is only sustainable for so long. So 2021, a year and a half after I started reading and pushing like this, I kept the same goal and I met it, but I only met it. And so 2022, I got married in February and I was pregnant that whole year. My goal, I dropped 25 books. And that was a really hard drop for me because to me, it meant a change in who I was. But the fact of the matter is that life was changing. I still read 47 books that year, even with my goal dropping to 25. I wanted to make sure that I could meet the goal because I am very goal oriented, and with something that's just simply unattainable, I get discouraged really easily. 2023, as my daughter is growing up, I leaned into audiobooks. When my daughter turned probably around 3 months old, I started walking with her every morning. I would go for a 45-minute walk, listen to my audiobook the whole time every morning. And that was like my solace because I was a newly stay-at-home mom. I read 50 books that year, and my goal was 25 again. So the same goal, but I read 3 more books, and most of them were audiobooks. So that balance that I had when I first started between physical and audio changes. And that's okay. Life changes what you're able to do. The important part to me was that I was still consuming stories. I was still a part of BookTube. I was still a part of the culture of reading that I really, really enjoyed so much. 2024 is when the shift, I think, really happened. And I think a lot of what we were seeing on Book Talk and recommendations and stuff changed in 2024, or maybe I just saw more of it. But I increased my goal from 25 books to 50 books. And I read 50 books. But I have to say, looking back, I realized that the books that I was reading were not fulfilling me in the way that the books that I had started out reading had. I was putting off books that were longer. I was putting off books that would take more out of me emotionally. I was putting off books that were heavier, that were part of longer series. I was putting off books that would take me more time in favor of meeting that goal. But I read, and I have always read, to be lost in a world. And it's hard to be lost in a world when you realize your emotional investment, your mental investment have been pushed aside to meet a quantifiable goal. And when the quantifiable goal takes priority, I found myself picking books that I knew I wouldn't be as invested in. After realizing this, I realized something had to give. Either I needed to be okay with reading things that were a little more surface level and hitting my goals, or I needed to lessen the goal and reprioritize the books that I was reading and that I wanted to read. And that's not to say that I didn't get a few books in that I really loved. I read Addie LaRue for the first time around that time. But prioritizing those books, because that is a hefty book and it's emotionally involved and it takes a little more time and a little more intent to read, prioritizing getting that book in that year meant that to catch up on my Goodreads goal, I read very short books that required a lot less of me. And not only that, but I was less intentional with my time with my daughter and with my family because my brain was so wrapped up in this Goodreads goal. So 2025, my daughter is 2.5 to 3 years old, and I dropped my goal from 50 to 12, another major drop in my Goodreads goal. And the point of dropping my goal was, number one, to allow myself to read the bigger books that I wanted to read. Number two, to give my brain the freedom that I only had to read one book a month, which is something I can do. I know I can do it because I can listen to a book in 3 days. But it gave me the space mentally to say, maybe I want to read a book physically again. Maybe I want to read an 800-pager. Maybe I just want to read a 3-book series and fit it in and not feel the pressure that I'm going to be behind. Plus, I keep the feeling that I have a goal that I'm working towards. I have something to keep me accountable, to do something that I still enjoy doing, to take care of myself. It freed me from my own mind. And not only did it do that, but it allowed me to be more present with my daughter. And in fact, in 2025, even though my goal was 12, I read 33 books. I still leaned hard into the audiobooks, but to give myself the space to breathe between each one was so important and so valuable. And that's not to say that I don't still enjoy something shorter or something lighter, but I get to follow my mood a little bit more than I had when my goal was so high and life was so demanding. The point is that I got to lean into the other kinds of books that I enjoy. This year, my goal is 12 again because it worked out really well. In fact, I have only listened to 2 audiobooks out of the 4 books that I will be finishing this year so far. So the first book I read this year was Hellbent by Leigh Bardugo, and I listened to that one on audio because I don't have it yet. The second book I physically read, was The Priory of the Orange Tree. And I am so proud of myself for getting through that 800-page heavy-duty novel for someone who hasn't read a physical book in probably over a year. That was the first one that I jumped into to force myself to make time within my life to do something that I enjoy. The third book I read this year, I actually just finished, was Gold Spun, which is a lot shorter, but it's one that's been sitting on my bookshelves for a hot second. And now this fourth one is actually Curse Undone, the second Gold Spun book. And the point of this is that I heard about these books years ago. They were ones that I had put off because of my Goodreads goal being so high and how difficult it was for me to swallow the pill that to read an 800-page book, I would have to either not hit my Goodreads goal, or I would have to read 5 or 6 short books to make up for the time I spent on this long book. So anyway, to wrap it up, 100 book goals, 5 book goals, I'm learning that there's no pride or shame in either. The point is to read. I had to give myself permission, but give yourself permission not to be boxed in by expectations. Whether those expectations are set by the outside world or are more internally set, if you're reading and you're making space to do something that you enjoy, you're making space to enjoy that experience, I am proud of you, because life changes and adjusting might be hard, but that's okay because we learn as we grow what works and what doesn't. And really, for me at least, reading is about the experience. It's about where it takes my mind, because there is so much out there to discover. There are so many stories out there to bring more magic, to bring more whimsy and love and empathy into our lives. It really is about the experience and what you get from what you're reading. I would love to hear your thoughts on this. Are goals helpful for you? Or do you find yourself putting too much pressure on the quantity over the quality? Let me know down in the comments. I'd love to hear what you have to say. Until next time, I will see you guys next week. Bye.